Hello, and welcome to the Art of Game Design. I'm your host, Kevin, and today we're going to talk about Team Fortress 2. You know, the greatest video game of all time is a matter of personal perspective, but some titles inevitably stand out for their impact and influence. Just as we have cultivated a rich appreciation for traditional art, video games too have given rise to a cultural landscape filled with iconic masterpieces. These digital works can be likened to the great luminaries like Da Vinci's, Rembrandt's, and Van Gogh's of their medium. And in 2007, Valve introduced a game that could be likened to the daring, transformative artistry of Pablo Picasso. Team Fortress 2 began as a promising addition to the first-person shooter genre and evolved into a work of distinct identity and enduring significance. Even today, it stands as a symbol of innovation within its category and continues to inspire developers and players alike. While the title may not have universal acclaim as the greatest, which is ultimately a subjective idea anyway, its influence and the passionate community surrounding it ensure its place as a fascinating subject in the history of gaming.
Yeah, I think Team Fortress 2 might be the greatest game ever created.
Headshot.
Such a unique and stylish video game is a lightning-in-a-bottle scenario, and it remains indestructible even today. You don't make it 18 years in the game without addicting gameplay, a killer story, and a fanbase so diehard, it makes sports fans look like tourists.
Oh my god! Oh, no way!
The culmination of everything that makes Team Fortress is a monolith to gaming, and an absolute talent factory for the people who walk through the halls of its creator. Everybody who knows me personally knows I love two things: Team Fortress 2 and, some other show. I can't remember the name.
Oh, come on, Doc! We're on the same day team here!
9 minutes, Doc.
If you've only ever played the games, you'd actually have no clue about the lush, absurd, and downright nutty answers to one question. Why are red and blue bitter rivals? Well, our answer lies not only in various update pages, but darkest corners of the wiki, and also the Team Fortress comics. And those pages are beautiful, snarky, cynical, lurid. Personality leaps from panels at every turn, and I think, truly, it's deserving of my favorite video game of all time. If you've watched my previous lore videos where things were loosely based in reality, throw them out, because this is no place for common sense.
My blood! He punched out all my blood!
And after polling my audience on their level of Team Fortress knowledge, actually seems like a lot of you are pretty new. And that's great, because that means I get the pleasure of introducing you to the comic series. That's right, like 75% of the Team Fortress lore is comprised of comics, and there's like a billion of them. Not just a silly hat game, that's for sure. For comprehension practices, this video is a modified timeline detailed in the Team Fortress 2 wiki, which I've divided into 3 simple sections. The first details a deep history of the world of Team Fortress. The second involves update comics and their hidden lore. And lastly, the full canon run of the Team Fortress comic series. Alright, that's enough blabbing, let's meet those mercs.
Together, they are Team Fortress.
Both got buckets of chicken. You want to do it?
Okay.
Zepheniah Neodemus Mann may as well be the most important person in Team Fortress history. He's a gentleman indirectly responsible for such destructive repercussions that would echo for a century later. He was the owner and proprietor of Mann & Sons Munitions Concerns, later known as Manco. The sons of Mann & Sons were triplets, born under a dark star on September 2nd, 1822. The two most notorious brothers were Redmond and Plutarch Mann, owners of their respective warring companies. And their third son? That's a different story. Gray Man possessed a near supernatural intelligence at the sacrifice of his strength. He learned speech while still in the womb, and when born, Zepheniah ordered to have him smothered to death, but he was abducted by an eagle during the Great Eagle Scourge of 1822. No one present wished to speak of that incident, therefore Redmond and Plutarch never even learned of their missing sibling. The Team Fortress catch-up comic pretty succinctly explains that the feud between the brothers is actually the result of a purchasing of land in the frontier United States. They all thought for sure that the sandy dunes of the southeast would be full of precious gravel. They weren't. Zepheniah had his own vision in mind for its usage, specifically hoping for a gravel pit for weapons manufacturing. And on his journey to see this patch of land, he contracted nearly every single discovered disease in recorded history. He then wrote his final will and testament on his own sloughed-off skin. Meanwhile, Gray Man was on his very own Mighty Monarch arc. He was actually raised by those eagles, and when he had outgrown them, he murdered the entire creed. He then fled to civilization for further conquest, vowing to become a thorn in the Mann family's side for centuries. And most sinister, in the background of this playing stage, a woman vies for a governess position in the Mann family. Her name is Elizabeth, or at least that's what she tells them. When she's elected, her first advisory notion to Zepheniah is to continue the Mann family tradition. Whoever is set to inherit the fortune will do so through blood. Surviving brother gets the spoils. And this marks the first reverberations of a stone that will cast waves through the next 100 or so troublesome years. Zepheniah is not long for this world. The events of Team Fortress Classic are a direct repercussion of the pinning of his will, leaving both of his sons each half of the land to war over. And these war sites deep within the Badlands of New Mexico, the casualty capital of the West, would become what we know of as the maps Gravel Pit and Dust Bowl. This was a biblical level punishment by their father for influencing him to even purchase the damn land in the first place, meaning they would be fighting over dominance of a useless patch of dirt for the rest of their pitiful lives. The remaining contents and wishes of the will are the following.
To his dearest maidservant Elizabeth, he left his estate including all deeds, accounts, and debts, his tobacco plantation, and the remains of his fortune his, quote, addle-pated sons have squandered.
He also left a mysterious miracle gravel cache that he found on a trip to Terra Australis. More on that later.
And to his faithful aide and tracker Barnabas Hale, ancestor of Saxton Hale, he left complete control of Manco.
But Zepheniah wasn't gonna go down easy, claiming that whoever would shoot over his bones, he would curse and haunt for the rest of their days. And he ended the will with a truly grave sign-off.
God and his angels will have to drag me screaming to heaven. I do not want to die. Damn you all to hell!
And once he passed on, he became this little specter that haunts every Halloween map. And he's not the only one either. This mysterious figure, Silas Mann, whom you can thank for keys and name tags, becomes the headless, horseless horseman, who's a big pain in the ass. Also, in a voice line, Zepheniah claims that Gray was his favorite son. What a big piece of shit. Alright, in the 1850s, a lot of things are happening quietly around the world, and most of what we know of this comes from the war update. That's going to be something we'll go into much deeper later. What you gotta know is that in the lore of Team Fortress, rocket launchers were invented before stairs. And who the hell would be cool enough to make bazookas in the 19th century? Shakespearecles. Not only did this tough motherfucker invent explosive arms, he was the creator of the two-story building, the stage play, and the God-fearing country of America. In reference to those stage plays, there's a rare tough break contract call where Miss Pauling recounts a Shakespearecles in the Park performance of Hamlet.
Hey, it's falling here. I'm watching Shakespeare-Cles in the park, and we just got to the part in Hamlet where Macbeth tells Hercules he's from the future, and Macbeth gets so angry he uses his heat vision and... They're lowering the steel cage! Oh, Hercules is losing the Intercontinental title for sure! Look, I gotta go. Here's a mission.
I love you, Hercules!
He could also bench 700 British pounds. Pretty impressive. And with rocket launchers being such an insanely advanced invention for the time, history itself would be playing catch-up for hundreds of years. Walking upward wouldn't come for another few hundred years. If you were getting somewhere, you were hitting up Jump Academy. The boy to finally give movement to the modern man was a young inventor, bright-eyed and hopeful. In 1857, a young bearded Abraham Lincoln solved a 300-year problem with a brilliant solution: the stairs. And thusly, he became a hero to the working class. Unfortunately, the fate of Abraham is not without its tragedy. To quote the page for the soldier secondary, the gunboats,
Unluckily, he never grasped the full import of his own invention, and died attempting to rocket jump on the world's first staircase in his laboratory at Ford's Theater.
the man to help perfect that invention would be Franklin Delano Roosevelt, whose legs were blown off in a similar incident. If you know, FDR was paralyzed in our reality as well, so that's a funny and fucked up way to contextualize that. John Wilkes Booth also existed in Team Fortress history, and they claim that he was Abraham's assassin, but obviously that contradicts the lore. It'd actually be Bilious Hale, Saxton's father, who would kill him, by sitting on his chest while others took turns shooting him. He won his towering pillar of hats for his bravery. Also, someone else actually owned a tower of hats at one point. The Gentleman of Leisure back in 1812. What a rich history. God bless America. The comic Loose Cannon was released on July 2nd, 2010, 3 days prior to the Engineer update, detailing the Engineer's lineage, the Conaghers, and their indelible role in the eternal Mann family. Most importantly, the inventor of Team Fortress's most powerful plot device, Radigan Conagher. In the present day of the comic, about the 1960s, Plutarch Mann stages a meeting with Del Conagher, the grandson of Radigan. Just as prodigal as his family before him, he's hoping with the right tools, he could change fate. An elderly woman calls out for a Mr. Conagher, a title which Del feels unworthy. Together as they approach the office, the woman fills him in with the details of the summoning. 60 years ago, Radigan promised a rather patchwork solution for Plutarch, the details of which are still kind of muddy to Del. And before they continue, she insists, do not shake Plutarch's hand. We cut back to 1850, the first true appearance of Zepheniah's will, and the beginning of the brothers' feud. A short 40 years later, Plutarch would be connecting with Radigan for a clandestine meeting, where he explains what should have been a 10-minute conquest with his crack team of mercenaries turned into an all-out stalemate. It turns out, Redmond Mann had assembled his own team to match. So, instead of taking it by force, he decided he'd simply outlast him. It seems like as good a time as ever to tell you who the original Blue Team was, because you're going to see some familiar faces. They're all important figures in history, fictional or not. Blue Team consisted of Billy the Kid as Scout, Stonewall Jackson as Soldier, Alfred Nobel, Demo, John Henry Heavy, Davy Crockett Sniper, Abraham Lincoln as the Pyro, Fu Manchu as Spy, Sigmund Freud as Medic, and Nikola Tesla, the Engineer. Put simply, Plutarch needs a machine that's going to allow him to outlive Redmond, and if Radigan complies, they will both be defying nature and God himself. He needs to become a monster. Radigan's reply? All right. As Radigan returns home to his storefront, he's actually beaten there by an enigmatic figure, the Administrator. They cut to the chase. Plutarch commissioned the machine, and Elizabeth will not be able to stop that. So the next best thing she could do would be to bribe Radigan to do the same for Redmond. And what she presents him with is a solid bar of Australium. Australians in the Team Fortress lore live in a fucking utopia. This is despite the world's public image of them being mouth-breathing savages, ruled by a kangaroo named Queen Trixie from 1947 to 1967. This is all thanks to a precious element, being able to power pretty much anything in the world due to its extremely mercurial atomic structure, and it possesses impossible health effects and it can adapt to virtually anything. It's the closest thing to a god particle. And it belongs to the mustachioed idiots of the world, constantly brawling and drinking like frat boys on spring break. And Elizabeth has been smuggling this element from them for over 10 years now. And it's all Radigan's if he can build this machine for his opposition. Back to present day. Plutarch asks Del if he's the man for the job. And let's be real, he's got 11 PhDs. He's the man. He seems flattered, but Radigan never shared any secrets with his family. Then Plutarch asks that if given his grandfather's blueprints, could he fix it? Yeah, likely so, but Radigan was buried with his work, so it's a no-go. That surprisingly won't be a problem because Plutarch has disrespectfully pilfered his grave, unearthing his plans. And Del can borrow these schematics on one condition. He's dead. He's dead. All right, he's dead. And just as he resurrects, he grabs Del by the collar, stating that each time he's gone a little longer, and there is nothing on the other side. After being threatened by Del, he continues his statement, which we read as he sifts through the papers.
Take your grandfather's notes, decipher them, learn how to fix my machine, and if you find anything else of interest, remember, it's mine. Bring it directly to me. Do not build it.
And of course he did anyways. The engineer update launched 3 days later, and on hidden pages of the official blog post we can actually see Radigan's creations. Those inventions being the Frontier Justice, the Wrangler, the Gunslinger, and the Southern Hospitality. And that's loose cannon. Also, at the beginning of the comic, fun fact, Del inquires about a painting, correctly stating it to be an original Picasso painting. That's a portmanteau of kick-ass and Picasso. And not only that, this was his Hunted in the Jungle period, and that actually mirrors that of Picasso's real-life self-portrait with a cloak during the beginning of his Blue period. Perfectly thematic. The comic Bombonomicon was released on October 27th, 2011, to coincide with the third Scream Fortress event. That's a Halloween event, by the way, that's just what we call it here. It begins with 3 kids trick-or-treating at the Red Base. Each member has something rather unorthodox to offer the children. But the most enticing would be a story from Tavish to Groot, the Demo Man. Demo is only 7 years of age, a normal, 2-eyed, healthy child, tasked with seeking employment on behalf of his demanding mother. Reason being, necromancers and the like were only around for 1 day. These jobs would certainly yield a pretty high reward. And soon, Tavish would happen upon the spire of one Merasmus, the necromancer of no refunds. Begrudgingly, the mage accepts his offer for work, and he sweeps the tower for a nickel. He warns them that this library holds a forbidden tome of wickedness, and he should avert his eye. Tavish doesn't heed that warning as he takes a tiny peek at the Bombonomicon, and boom, his eye is haunted by the book. To rid the world of the problem, Merasmus casts a spell, and this is all Tavish can recall. He awoke in a field, eye gone, no castle. He hears the word that his eye still haunts the location every Hallows Eve as Mononculus. Soldier finds that story kinda hard to believe because he actually knows the magician. He's his deadbeat roommate. He and Soldier get into a scruffle and he breaks Merasmus' staff. Thus, he sicks Mononculus upon the crew, as is now a decade-old Scream Fortress tradition.
You haven't heard the last of Merasmus the Magician!
Alright, it's the summer of 1968, the main setting for Team Fortress 2. Plutarch and Redmond hire the same group of 9 individuals to war over a patch of land each promised to them. And you know what? Just to reiterate, the 9 mercs are Scout, Jeremy Willis, Soldier, Jane Doe, Pyro, Demo Man, Tavish Finnegan de Groot, Heavy, Mikhail or Misha, Engineer, Del Conagher, Medic, Herbert Ludwig, Sniper, McMundy, and Spy. These gaggle of burnouts are overseen by the Wicked Witch of Badwater, Helen, or Elizabeth, whatever really, the administrator, and her overworked assistant, Miss Flo Pauling. The man fueling this perpetual blood feud is one Saxton Hale, the inventor of the hi-fi, the owner of England, and most importantly, of Manco, the munitions and headwear company. as an acting subsidiary of Helen's TF Industries, which is mostly a shadow organization. Not much is known about it other than its major divisions, being comprised of Manco, Manco Monkey Nautics, Red, Blue, Valve Corporation, and TF2 Hobbies Incorporated, producers of Gargoyles and Gravel.
I'm trying to teach Scout gargoyles and gravel. No, Scout, there's no such thing as a muscle wizard.
Pretty much all of Team Fortress 2, the game, takes place in the summer of '68, a perennial and fruitless struggle for the ownership of these patches of shit, meaning that every time you get hit with one of these, or even one of these, we can't really say that it isn't canon. So, yeah. Speaking of debatable canon, I can't personally be certain about community-made maps made later in the development cycle, but I can be for sure about core Valve maps being canonically taking place in that summer. Anyways, moving on. One of these cinematics I'd like you to take a gander at is Meet the Spy. It's got a few tidbits that make surprisingly profound ripples in the canon, and honestly, you've probably heard plenty of this before, whether you know it or not.
Intruder Alert! Red Spy is in the base! A Red Spy is in the base!
Yeah, that one. Blue team scrambles to find Red Spy, and their own spy groans about their ineptitude and hubris. And when Scout asks, "Are you the president of his fan club?" Well,
no. That would be your mother.
What the? Wait,
Indeed. And now he's here to us.
this little gag is actually what I wanted you to see the most. It ends up becoming a sleeper hit in the canon. You'll learn plenty things about Spy and Scout's mother as we go along, as this will be explored until the very last few panels of the comics. I mean, the end of the storyline. Sadly not in risque photographs, I'm sorry to disappoint. There's also a few cool things we can talk about here too. One, Sniper's model is actually updated after the cinematic to always have that scar on his cheek. We get a little boom, probably can't show that. And then we finish the cinematic with this little number.
Ma petit chou-fleur.
What a classic. For those wondering, the phrase mon petit chou-fleur literally just means my little cauliflower. Just a term of endearment at the time. I think it really fits the moment. And now we begin to talk about war, because something soon would rear its ugly head to put a divide between blue and red. Hey, speaking of primary colors, you know what else comes in blue and red? Yep, that's right, Gamer Supps, the proud partner of today's video. Use code CHIP at checkout for a free sample pack and an additional 10% off your order. That's right, code CHIP at checkout for 10% off. Thank you once again to the folks at Gamer Supps and people like you for making these videos possible. Back to it. To coincide with the war update of December 2009, the titular 21-page comic was released. A much tighter narrative, the comic focused on 3 protagonists: Red Demoman, Blue Soldier, Miss Pauling, and their omnipresent antagonistic force, the Administrator. The comic begins simultaneously within the events of the Meet the Spy cinematic. The first panel is fashioned with her now famous line delivery, and while those events occur, Miss Pauling presents a problem to Helen. A background check is dredged forth a forbidden alliance between Red Demo and Blue Soldier. They met at a projectiles weapons expo and have a friendship anybody would be jealous of. As Miss Pauling would put it, a lifelong friendship. Helen's not happy. That's a profound portrayal of her trust. But it's not like she'd have any clue of the severity of this bond. She's never even had a friend before. So, in a cold, calculated move, she gives the nuclear option, ringing up one Saxton Hale. So, what's Hale up to? Well, he's diving out of a fucking plane and somersaulting through glass into his very own office. Like any self-respecting man, he starts his morning with a seemingly raw steak. He then checks his account balances. He's the 6th richest man in the world. Must be nice. The most interesting detail to me is when he picks up the call. He greets Helen, asking her if she still likes steak dinners and sex with handsome men, which makes me wonder way too many things. Helen asks for a solution to her issue, and in Manco fashion, Hale throws guns at any situation. This is no exception. Badlands, New Mexico. Tavish can't seem to catch a fucking break. Making tea and scones for his rather demanding mother, he would stand some pretty tough love. 3 jobs at once is nothing compared to the 26 his father had, God rest his soul. She remarks that no demo man worth his sulfur has ever had an eye in his head past 30. Which, I guess, means two things here. Demo is in his mid-30s, and his parents were very much both blind. Enter Miss Pauling, who is very forthcoming with her proposal. If Demo kills Blue Soldier, he'll receive the Eyelander as a result. The Eyelander's great. It's a haunted sword with an insatiable hunger for heads. What's not to love? Demo, though tempted, refuses the offer, to which Pauling replies that he can hold on to them while he mulls this over. Oh, and just for the record, Soldier already agreed to his end of the deal. A different agent is sent to the home of Jane Doe, who is almost immediately put in danger through the old 1-2. Simply put, Helen falsifies evidence that only Soldier could fall for, and it isn't until Demo utters the ugly truth that Soldier was a civilian who ran around Poland LARPing during the war. And that gets Soldier so bad he loses his marbles and agrees to the contract. And thus, war began. Also, something to note, Zepheniah Mann's family portrait can be seen in the control panel featuring, you guessed it, Helen. By the way, speaking of war, this actually isn't the only time the Administrator had done this. In the Meet Your Match update, a comic titled The Showdown was released, where Heavy and Pyro were set up by Helen to war against each other for new weapons. Also, the secret base she was staying at was in Bilious Gorge, likely named after Saxton's father, Bilious Hale. And speaking of Pyro, that actually brings us straight to our next topic. The Pyromania update actually gives us some pretty deep insight to an interesting legal case. Specifically, the United States investigation on Mann Co. for their failed rocket launch, resulting in the closure of their Monkey Nautics program. This would see the untimely death of one Poopy Joe. The Ballad of Poopy Joe unfolds more so in court documents found secretly on the Pyromania update page. Clicking the banana at the bottom results in 5 pages, 2 of which are legible, 1 partly so. The gist is this. Mann Co. was involved with the United States Senate, specifically in deep shit. They stole weapons and misappropriated the entire nation's supply of Australium. That's a big problem for many reasons, but the most immediate involves poor Poopy Joe, a vervet monkey who was involved in a space race against the Soviets. Not unlike our reality, just this time with primates, it was Poopy Joe versus Vladimir Bananas. Mann Co. was to send him into space, and this was going to be possible with liquid Australium, of which the US supplied, and along with this rocket, he'd be given 3 objects for his mission: a pickaxe, a sword, and a tiny bugle. Do those seem familiar? Hale snuck in at the last moment and filled the rocket with gravel water from defective suitcase explosives. This would kill Poopy Joe. Now, he tries to obfuscate this, but Saxton isn't a man made for deception, so that doesn't go well. And when Helen is pressed for the Australium, her identity, for one, is redacted, and so is her explanation for stealing the element. Whatever she explains to the senators, they run home in a panic for their lives. The Valve-created map Doomsday is actually a playable perspective of this scenario. The players need to bring Australium to the rocket to go get Poopy Joe into space, and once one team wins, it doesn't go so well. The Team Fortress community actually loves Poopy Joe. This is especially true in the mapping scene, as tons of community-made maps have made references to him. For instance, we have a commemorative Poopy Joe hat known as the Never Forget hat. It is present in the game, but has never been publicly available for wear. But you can see it as a prop in the map Banana Bay. Speaking of Banana Bay, underneath the blue spawn is a summoning circle made in hopes to resurrect him. Canaveral, another space launch map based off the real launch site in Florida, has memorials to Poopy Joe in its Spawn Rune slideshows. Hey gang, Editor Chip here. Poopy Joe was also the spokesperson for the Man Nanas brand. And when he passed, they decided to just grift the brand themselves. Therefore, the Man Nanas hat was made. It's got a Yeti on the front with a bunch of bananas in its mouth. We'll get into Yetis a little bit later. This is also unavailable in-game, but I thought it was fun to include. I thought you should see this. And honestly, if you're asking me, my favorite reference is in the cinematic for the Invasion update. In the movie Midnight Showing, if you listen very carefully, you can hear Morse code. And that message? Okay, let's finally talk about Saxton Hale for a minute, and his greatest gift to the players of Team Fortress, the Manco store.
Now you too can buy, make and sell products and get in fights.
Yeah, the internet has at least existed since 1968, specifically the email, and Saxton Hale has been made aware of it.
It seems one of the hidden directives of my staff has been to keep the internet's existence from me, under the assumption that if I find out about this miraculous invention, I would immediately bankrupt the company trying to buy a country I have somebody killed.
He found out about it as one of his employees was dying in a headlock from a gorilla. It was Gorilla Wrestling Fridays. His last request, croaking in agony, was, "Email my mother that I love her." And once being explained how to do so and what the internet could do, Hale became many things. Apparently, the owner of both the proud country of England and the Manco store, the real-life storefront where you could buy realistically anything the game had to offer at the time. And in these online bundles were cosmetic sets that offered unique stat boosts. You guys remember that shit? I'm just getting old, I think. Also, the comic Bidwell's Big Plan introduced the idea of both community-made items and lore-expanded reasons for the Manco store. This was also the debut of one Charles Darling, Saxton's former teacher and now nemesis. In the same comic, he also makes mentions of her, likely the administrator, a mysterious figure that would lure him into corporate hell and away from his one true love, Maggie. This is only the very beginning of Saxton's monetary conquest on the world. In a now defunct blog post promoting Gaming Head's figures of the Team Fortress mercs, Sniper was also conned. Saxton and a little girl claiming to be his niece solicited Mr. Mundy for a $5 charity fund. And upon signing the documents, his likeness now belongs to Mr. Hale until the year 7039. Should've read the fine print, Mick. But not all of Hale's customers are actually victims, because in the contract, a tie-in comic with a gunmetal update, we actually see that Manco has an elite customers lounge, where which he deals with very high-paying mercenaries. And drink this in, by the way, because these are like the only paid murderers we see that aren't affiliated with Team Fortress. Anyways, that armory doesn't last very long because Ms. Pauling is able to smuggle all of his high-grade weapons out, leaving a simple IOU in place. Anyone that tells you that the gunmetal update isn't lore significant is only mostly telling the truth, because if it weren't for the contracts and the like, we'd never have a plethora of backstory voice lines, and we wouldn't have campaign coins, which are like mostly compliant with the lore. Look, there's Queen Trixie, look. On June 17th, 2014, the cinematic Expiration Date dropped to promote the Love and War update. It centers around a clever double entendre as Medic and Engineer make a grave discovery about their teleporters, and Scout pleads to Spy for advice on how to woo Ms. Pauling.
You want to be my lover? Earn it. Seduce me!
As it turns out, using the teleporter results in these massive green tumors inside the subject.
Demo back with the beer yet? Cause oh! What the hell is that? Tumors!
And now they've all been using it, and following that conclusion, they've only got about 3 days left to live. So, Engineer fashions everyone a wristwatch to count down their remaining lives. As the rest of the team watches Scout's attempts to win over Pauling, Medic and Engineer burst in.
Guys! Hey, fellas, listen! It's just bread that gets tumors!
Not even tumors! It's some form of self-aware beauty mark that only metastasizes in an environment of pure wheat.
So long as no more bread is teleported, they're safe.
Question.
What's your question, soldier?
I teleported bread.
What?
You told me to.
How much?
I have done nothing but teleport bread for 3 days.
There have you been sending it?
Ms. Pauling is very clearly frustrated. This is her only day off of the whole year. Nothing could make this any worse.
Why don't we discuss it over dinner?
What the hell is that?
Once they devise on how to get rid of this bread monster, they make one of the most daring maneuvers these two could ever muster. And the result? Actually, not that bad.
This is not
That was so much fun.
You're not mad?
I was furious. Oh my god, you set off the briefcase alarm and you were having a prom for some reason. But then there was a monster and we shot it and I built a bomb and I think my leg's broken. Can we do this again?
Yeah, sure. Miss Pauline, I guess it's a date.
Actually,
This is my only day off this year.
Oh.
Oh, but you could ride along with me on some jobs. Tomorrow, I'm belt sanding the fingerprints off a pile of corpses.
No.
Oh, you could help me yank the molars out of a box full of heads.
Noted it.
Okay, well, Friday I've got to kill somebody who pressed a briefcase alarm button and... you're already gonna be at that one.
This entry serves to solidify a few of Scout's biggest connections. One, his relationship with Spy, which is tenuous but still caring.
Seduce me.
Spy himself tiptoes around the obvious, but genuinely wants to see Jeremy become an honest man. And two, his unrequited love with Miss Pauling, who doesn't outright resent Scout, but it's pretty clear their relationship isn't going to go anywhere. Something we'll get to touch on way more in the rest of the comics. Also, it didn't dawn on me until I typed out the words expiration date that it was a double entendre. How did that take me 10 years, man? All right, this is the last stop on our non-sequitur update train. One might say this is the end of the line. Yeah, whatever. I just felt I should include this one because this was an entirely community-made update that spawned 23 cosmetics, a weapon, and a taunt, alongside 13 minutes of SFM cinematic. This was the brainchild of now game developer McV of Long Way Home Studios. When she released the trailer, she was invited to Valve's headquarters only a week later, where she was asked to present her project before the SFM team at the company, and where Robin Walker, co-creator and lead designer, had asked if she would, quote, like to make it official. Of course, my hat goes off to everybody involved. It's updates like these that kept the world spinning, so thank you. Oh, also, if you're a big fan, you'll understand that this is the origin point of the
Bonus ducks!
The advent of the comic Blood Brothers was actually an alternative reality game put on by Valve themselves. At this time, in August 10th, 2012, nobody knew about Gray Man or Zephaniah's will. To add to this tense air, mysteriously, these large carrier tanks began to sprout up in many of the maps in the game. It all started off with a patchwork letter, the aforementioned will, and a full-on investigation of players high-fiving each other. This would spit out certain codes when specific items were equipped. And if I may quote the wiki page for this directly, in the map Foundry, a hidden room exists with a sign reading Dr. Wilson's Auto Borax self-scrubbing mechanical soap. Two wooden planks propped up against the sign frame the letters to form Tobor. Several other rooms in this map feature hints to the then unreleased update. And Tobor spelled backwards is... yeah, you guessed it. On the same map on Red's side, Scout and Heavy can be seen staring at grainy photographs at their would-be assailants. Now, both of these rooms are inaccessible in a normal game. You would need to find them via noclip or a similar exploit. Tobor actually shows up again, as a secret page on the TF2 website would eventually surface, showing this image. Players who follow the crafting recipe on the paper would be able to assemble the comic themselves. And that's not all. If you look closely and jot down the letters covered in blood, Tobor. Pretty clever. When this comic dropped, those lucky enough to be playing at the time got this system-wide alert in-game. Pretty spooky. Okay, it's 1971. Plutarch and Redmond have rented out the Alamo and have airlifted it from San Antonio to New Mexico. And after receiving a tear-stained letter from each other, unbeknownst to their true originator, they meet at the most patriotic spot possible. There, the two brothers deliberate. Plutarch proposes a truce, with the idea of a male pregnancy machine as their olive branch, courtesy of one Mr. Ludwig. This would allow one of them to produce a suitable heir, but Redmond shuts the idea down. They've wasted their whole lives, and the Mann family is no longer suitable for the modern world. This war and this land should die with them. Enter Gray Man. Having slaughtered all of Redmond's higher protection, he introduces himself and his motives, pinning both those letters to dupe either brother. His aura farming doesn't really do much because they forget who he is just seconds later. He begins to explain to the two elderly men a detailed origin of his place in the family. And as he does, we spot a peculiar contraption fashioned upon his spine. It's a life extender machine, a mobile one. You see, Gray's different from the brothers. He pulled himself from the muck and despair of destitute. Plutarch and Redmond, silver spoon man children with no talent to their name. 150 years have passed. Gray has skulked in those shadows, waiting for the perfect opportunity to seize what truly matters as their birthright. It's not pride, not the gravel pits, hell, it's not even the money. It is Manco. Well, time to die. Believe it or not, the moments directly after are actually continued in a Scream Fortress comic titled Grave Matters. Plutarch and Redmond's phantoms bitch about who lived the longest. Technically it was Plutarch, but this is getting nowhere until they settle things in court. Oh, okay. Well, who's the attorney, you might ask? Jane Doe, the soldier. It pretty much goes in circles, and they end up deciding that whoever's spirit passes from this realm first is going to be the loser. Therefore, Blue and Red must now compete by dragging each other's brother's coffin into hell. This is the objective of the map Hell Tower, a Scream Fortress version of the map High Tower, where which the payload reaches the final checkpoint and the brother is dragged to hell. The entire map goes with it, and the first team to reach a spellbook and pry themselves back to the material realm is deemed the victor. And all of that is completely canon.
Look at me now, Father! I won!
Gray finally moves in on Manco. Behind him, a gargantuan army of robot mercenaries. As Manco is under siege, it sounds like the onus falls upon Saxton Hale. It would, but it looks like he's too busy wrestling a Yeti. So instead, he proclaims the death of Redmond and Plutarch to Red and Blue, putting a grave end to the Great Gravel War, and more importantly, their jobs. So it sounds like the boys need a new gig. Well, what the hell could such a motley crew of danger be useful for? Well, it turns out we actually have a direct answer. In Saxton Hale's Evention event comics of Fate Worse Than Chess, we see what the hulking Australian is up to. Through a clever new storytelling format invented by Mr. Hale himself titled Exposition. Our story takes us to the Sanjup Junkar district in the Kingdom of Bhutan, just days after the conclusion of the Great Gravel War, where Hale and his assistant Bidwell are deep undercover as primate violence specialists, where Bidwell gets the call that Manco is under siege. And when given the news, Hale decides to fight the Yeti anyways, hoping to best it in combat to the point of extinction. He takes that opportunity to film a message to the mercs back home, to the tune of, "We're all kinda fucked, I'm not paying you, and you're not morally fighting for anyone or anything. Simply, this is a fight for your job." This actually works out pretty handsomely for the mercs because the robots inexplicably run on piles of money. Hunt the bot, take the cash. And as is an Anephra in this series, to the victor go the spoils. Okay, this aside isn't actually canon, but there's a character so good I feel like I've got to mention them anyways. In the first fully community-driven update, Robotic Boogaloo, there was a comic, Death of a Sales Bot. Its primary purpose was to promote robot hats in the game for the first time. The narrative of it's pretty simple. Grayman's plan isn't working out and he decides to compete in the hat market. And this causes such irreversible damage to the world that Engineer travels back in time from 1999 to warn his teammates. Scout asks who's president in 1999. And that would be Kisses von Butternubs, a sweater-clad Pomeranian with its brain exposed. That is not elaborated upon any further. Okay, back to Saxton and that Yeti, who he hasn't bested just yet, which is exactly what he wants. This is actually resolved in the Jungle Inferno cinematic, coinciding with Team Fortress's last major update. Man, it's in a biological research base on a secret location, where Saxton hunts this creature for sport, bringing the poor mercs with him. And you know what? I could explain what happens, but why don't I just show you? Now, since there's no near-extinct creatures to hunt anymore, Mercenary Park is now officially open for business. obviously a riff on 1993's Jurassic Park. And there's no real definitive location for Mercenary Park, but some maps are based on historical sites or real-life counterparts. And if we follow that logic, the best we can manage is looking at this H-34 Park helicopter, which is a caricature of the Sikorsky copters used in the Vietnam War. And given that Hale was just in Bhutan, we're for sure in the jungles of Southeastern Asia somewhere. Okay, now that Yeti's been dealt with, what about the robots? Well, it sounds like it's time for Man vs. Machine. For those uninformed, MVM was and still is the definitive co-op game mode for Team Fortress 2. Reminiscent of a tower defense where 6 players withstand wave after wave of robot hordes. Compliant to the lore, the defenders are red team and the robots are facsimiles of blue. And all while this war wages over the future of Manco, the comic Shadowboxers details what the Mercs are up to. In Coal Town, the famous MVM locale, Red Team follows Ms. Pauling into a Manco facility to find out where the bots are going to strike next. Soldier states that single-handedly he invaded Gray's lair and he knows the details down to the date and location. But because it's Soldier, it's pretty quickly dismissed. It's not until he lore drops that Gray was raised by eagles, something only the women in charge would know, that it lends to his credibility. So how the hell did he do this then? Simple. With his cardboard robot disguise, of course. Looks like everyone's gonna need one of those. A week later, they sneak into the compound during one of Gray's proclamations, and he's frustrated at the idea of someone sneaking in with such stealthy prowess, and claims his newly upgraded engineer bot can detect any trespasser. And unfortunately for the crew, he's right. Fun fact, by the way, Gray Gravel Co. is a sign we see in this comic pretty often, and it's actually been in game for a very, very long time. What a slow burn reveal. Okay, that's all of the secondary material. By this point, you know the history and all of the events that lead up to the series of comics. Something I honestly herald as some of my favorite fiction ever written. From here on out, all gas, no brakes. The rest of this video is going to be spent reading the main line from beginning to end. So, if this is your first time, buckle up. Let's experience some peak. Our first entry is Ring of Fire, which starts in the early months of 1972. Saxton is doing what he does best. Again, equipped with his own pilot, Jerry, and a mounted Yeti, the very same from A Fate Worse Than Chess. He crashes into his own place of business as he does many times before, and waiting for him is Gray Man and his legion of robots. Gray makes it simple. He wants Manco. And according to the company rules, anyone who can best their CEO in hand-to-hand combat is deemed the victor. Therefore, this sick bastard employs his 7-year-old daughter Olivia to fight him. Saxton really thinks this over, the child pounding away at him. Eventually, in a rage, he forfeits, damning Gray for his wicked ingenuity. And that leaves Manco in the wretched, skinny hands of Gray Man. Gray's first move as CEO is obviously to terminate all employment with the mercenaries. Saxton, seeing he's been had, flees the country in a deep shame. And the administrator is nowhere to be found. And when Miss Pauling runs in to deliver the news, all that's there is a lonely terminal screen. It simply reads, Miss Pauling, hide. It's been 6 months since the mercenaries have been fired. One might wonder, what vocations could suit our beloved psychopaths? And for the case of Soldier, we actually get to see. Leading a tour of celebrity homes, he ferries a gaggle of elderly women to the famous Welsh singer Tom Jones's house. As Jones understandably questions the home intrusion, Soldier solves a panic-inducing situation the only way he knows how. And just as Jones perishes, a familiar figure saunters from upstairs. Merasmus. And he's fucking pissed. This is absolutely not the first time he's pulled some shit like this. There's even a whole comic to explain this, which we can take a look at right now. Doommates was the latest installment of the roommate feud, featuring Soldier and Merasmus shacked up together. And while out of town at WizardCon 1156, Soldier ruined Merasmus' keep in such a short period of time, it actually drove him to madness. Not only that, but he burned his body and imbibed on all of his kill me, come back stronger pills. Merasmus, wishing to punish Jane, vowed to kill everyone Soldier ever cared about, inspiring the events of the 4th annual Scream Fortress special. Anyways, back to the comic, where the police are now hot on Soldier's tail, and the person to take Jane in looks a little familiar. And while she's there, they get Merasmus to check Tom's pulse, which frames him for the murder and lands him in Badlands Correctional Facility for pretty much the rest of the comics. He actually narrates grave matters from prison. We cut to a stuffy board meeting where Pyro has become the CEO of Frontier Engineering. Miss Polly knows there's only one thing to lure them out of their cage, and after committing arson on a neighboring building, Pyro can resist the temptation no longer. It's time to get back into the game. The person to handle that news the worst has to be Tavish. Now haggard and out of shape, he and the Islander waste their lives watching daytime television. Islander can, talk now, by the way. When Miss Pauling and Soldier arrive, he's a little bit irritated, but at the even mere mention of his previous job, he practically rises from the dead, reborn a new man. He and the Islander are back in fucking business. And when we cut back to Gray, he's absolutely furious. Helen didn't just cut and run when she heard the news. No. She stole the entire supply of Australium. Clearly the lifeblood of Gray's extension machine, and it's starting to run a little low. Just then, a shadowed figure explains that it's not just Manco who's running out. The entire world's supply. Back to the Mercs, where Soldier, Pyro, Demo, and Miss Pauling decide they'll plot a flight from Siberia to Australia to pick up Heavy and Sniper. Demo lets loose that Medic has employment now, and a fancy job at that, so he's unlikely to return to this shit show. And equally hard to find would be Dell. He likely had no problem finding employment. Well, this ought to be hell then. Isn't there a mercenary who would be extremely easy to find right now? That'd be pretty nice. Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess that'll do. It's time for Team Fortress presents Unhappy Returns. 15 years ago, deep within the African veldt, Saxton and Maggie are back to back, surrounded by deadly panthers, from their fight with, more deadly panthers. Mags taunts Saxton with the job he's soon to inherit at Manco, to which he rebukes, "She better get used to seeing this ugly mug more often." And as they cleave through the jungle cats, it's starting to feel like there's more than just blood in the air, if you catch my drift. Saxton will never stop punching panthers with Mags. Or maybe he will. Enter Charles Darling, the antithesis of our outdoorsman. He was Saxton's hunting mentor in another life, first introduced, again, in Bigwell's big plan. He'll be the first to grab these felines and make a bizarre new invention, a zoo. And you know what? To hell with that zoo. Sax and Mags just found a new thing to blow up and exterminate. The fun times never have to end. Right, Mags? Oh. The reunion from prison leaves, much to be desired. Saxton inquires about Maggie's late husband, of which he absolutely ruined the funeral for. And Mags returns the favor, asking what the charges were for Saxton's imprisonment. Turns out, he finally burnt down Darling Zoo. Maggie's unimpressed. Saxton figured that Charles would have a solution to getting Manco back. And when he tries stirring the pot about their rivalry as a trio, Maggie pushes her long-dead feelings into the cargo. More or less, she's willing to help the man. He's still Saxton Hale. Smash cut to 2 Fort Prison. Scout and Spy are shacked together. Scout frenetically practicing his defense while Spy pulls an entire banquet from his jaw. Scout reminisces about a time when Soldier was his defense attorney, which went bad, and another time where a lamp was his defense, which went even worse. This actually all transpired in a separate comic, titled A Smithsmith Story, TF2's fictionalized version of Christmas. While Jeremy panics, Spy murders their cellmate and is promptly visited by Mayor Mike. He slips in a file in the pie as a bit of dark humor as they're 6 feet behind plexiglass. They're not getting out of that. Meanwhile, Tavish and Jane are in their civvies looking for a way into the courthouse. He starts with an aggressive interrogation of an elderly woman, to which Demo jumps in. A little good cop, bad cop, but pretty soon Spy and Scout are set to publicly hang. And well, they find that location with ease. Before the trial even starts, Mayor Mike just slams down a guilty verdict. It's quickly turning into a shit show as the public defender explains that this is far from a fair trial in nearly every conceivable way. Soldier then takes the opportunity to do the most soldier thing he can. He takes public defender, snaps the lawyer's neck, and declares Scout be sent to the electric chair for choosing a different lawyer. He then strangles Scout in an act of passion, just like in a Merasmus story. This completely blows Spy's plans of escape now, as Tavish and Jane are also set to hang. Hard cut to the library, where Miss Pauling is looking for genealogy records on a microfiche. Pyro is doing what Pyro does, and when Miss Pauling learns that whatever file she's holding seems to be the last of its kind, she goes against the library's wishes and burns it in Pyro's pile. All right, time to go. Now, let's rewind 5.5 months with the comic. Scout desperately needs to access his life savings in Two Fort's bank now that he has no job. He also needs help moving the money, and probably using the bathroom too. Spy doesn't really want any of that, but at the mention of his mother, Spy stops. He's got a jet leaving in 50. Scout has 20. Turns out he blew his entire life savings on Tom Jones memorabilia. He plans to have it sold when Jones dies, and Spy remarks that Tom Jones is virtually immortal. That's a terrible plan. Speaking of dastardly and terrible plans, the people of Two Fort find the duo and slam them closed in the vault, leading the sting operation into just a pitiful display. The Mercs get absolutely batshit accusations thrown their way. Two Fort's in shambles for things they were not involved in. And just before they can hang, Miss Pauling swoops in to save the day. And the crazy shit they're being accused for? Mayor Mike himself has committed all of those crimes unknowingly. She hands him a pamphlet of mayoral duties, which states the mayor can absolutely not hang criminals, so he attempts to pardon the Mercs, something he also cannot do. So Miss Pauling just unbinds them, and the town folk start their journey of self-education, such as bringing down a sanctuary for... I can't say that word out loud, probably. Anyways, let's just get out of here. Smash cut to Darling's estate, where it turns out Mags was working for Charles the whole time, and it seems that Darling has a rather wicked proposition for Saxton Hale. And finally, deep within the freezing expanse, Mikhail, the Heavy, treks into the Jugjur mountain range in Siberia. He meets with an elderly lady and grabs his supplies. She remarks that she didn't expect him in the worst storm she's ever seen. She hands him a note atop the box. It reads, "Urgent. Call Miss Pauling." The woman on the other end made it sound quite dire. But Mikhail does not respond. Alright, before we begin our next big comic, let's talk about Sniper's family. Something that gets explored in several comics, starting with Meet the Director. So the Meet the Team cinematics are canon. The most important detail to take from those is that Helen, the administrator, used those interviews as a guise to dig up details on the mercenaries. And specifically Heavy and Sniper took the bait. In the cinematic Meet the Sniper, he's clearly on pretty good terms with his parents, even seen having a conversation with his mother at a payphone.
Not a crazed gunman, Dad. I'm an assassin. What the difference being one has a job and the other's mental sickness?
We even have letters we've seen him write back home in the Sniper vs. Spy update. Heavy himself also talked to the director about Sasha, his minigun, at exhaustive length. And, well, this would come back to haunt both of them, expectedly. Like Heavy having photographs of both his family's house and him asleep with Sasha. Hey guys, Editor Chip here. There's not really a good place for me to put this conversation that I want to have, but I figured this is as good as I'm gonna get. A lot of fans know that Heavy has a PhD in Russian literature, and unfortunately, I don't actually think that that's canon. Now, he says this line in Poker Night at the Inventory, right here.
I have PhD in Russian literature.
Do you use that in your line of work?
More than you think.
And if we want to classify that as canon, we'd have to classify Penny Arcade, Homestar Runner, and the Sam and Max universe all canonical. I don't think that that's possible. That's a huge can of worms. I don't think Valve recognizes this as canon. So actually, I don't think he's classically trained. despite that being like in the zeitgeist. Okay, back to it. To make matters worse, Sniper received a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Mundy on the, quote, red house on the left. This was a dagger in their side, ready to plunge should anyone learn about their jobs. So naturally, when Manco fell to Gray and his robot army, they both hightailed it home to protect their families. And if the Mundys look familiar, it's completely on purpose, because rumor has it that due to time constraints, they were fashioned as Muriel and Eustace Bagg from Courage, the Cowardly Dog. So, after the botched trial in Two Fort, they were to reunite the team in a timely manner, which meant the gang was going to have to split up. So, Soldier, Scout, and Pyro headed to Siberia to retrieve Heavy, and Miss Pauling, Spy, and Demo would head to Australia to find Sniper. Which brings us perfectly into A Cold Day in Hell. The crew pursues Heavy, tracking down the same old woman from before. It's extremely difficult to traverse, and she warns them the same. And in that moment, Soldier rebukes the idea, and she offers them American second economy coats. Soldier hears the word second economy and immediately thinks of the USSR, despite the label, so he rejects the commie-made jackets. To which he protests that his Manco jacket, made in China by the way, is way better. And now, Soldier, Scout, and Pyro must brave the Jugdur Mountains with no protection from the elements. Meanwhile, Saxton is wary of Darling. The room they stand in is adorned with the trophies of animals. And when Charles draws attention to it, Hale understands his enemy not to be of a violent nature, so what gives? Well, perhaps worse than expected, the animals that flank the room are still alive. They're just standing on boxes, posing as trophies. Most of these species are actually the last of their kind, and Darling wishes to make them immortal through Australium. Saxton claims that'd actually be pretty easy. It won't be. He's unaware of Helen's smuggling, but Darling isn't. In fact, to his awareness, the administrator has been smuggling Australium for 150 years. Astonished, Saxton replies, "Why?" Back in Siberia, Soldier's having a rather rough time. Now overgrown and delusional, he argues with Christopher in the communist mountain, and the barren landscape before him, including his own hands and friends, is starting to look pretty delicious. Well, okay, I guess not everything's a hallucination. Yeah, as it turns out, Pyro and Scout have discovered what happened to the late Amelia Earhart. While flying a commercial plane for Top Flight hot dogs, she met her unfortunate end. And while the mercs bicker, the sound of growling bears can be heard. And according to Soldier, only two things attract bears: honey and menstruating women. Immediately, the finger is pointing at Pyro. He always knew it. Yeah, the plane is stocked to the brim with honey. What were you thinking? So he gets the bright idea that they should eat it all before the bears get there, and that goes extremely poorly. Okay, new plan. Fix the plane before they get here. It doesn't matter. It's already too late. Scout gets the bones punched out of him, which actually ends up being just fine because they're actually Amelia's. And right as it seems that the Scout has been dealt with a grisly fate, Soldier, completely fucking naked, covered in honey, saves the day with a patented neck snap. And Pyro? Let's just move on. That's so fucked up. Regardless, that's a fat W for the mercs.
Victory.
And Mikhail shows up just in time. He mentions that the bears they fought, just babies, and the mother has taken notice. Now, if there was any mercenary who was going to be able to fist fight a bear, it'd be Heavy. And boy, does it look like he's having a good fucking time doing it.
And the bear killed every last one of them.
Mayor Mike concludes the story. A historical one on the founder of Two Fort, Claude Huggins, who hid under the corpse of his wife from a family of bears and was too scared to leave, so he founded the town on her very corpse. And there, at 1847, two teenage bullies forced him to rename it Two Farts. And too scared to change it back, Two Fort was born. A historical coward so notable, ire has reached him from other games. Like this graffiti in Left 4 Dead stating, "Claude Huggins, you are a coward and you let your children die." In that very same library, something sinister is occurring. Gray and Olivia have arrived looking for records of an 1850 census. Presumably, anything to do with the administrator. but we know from the trial of 2 Fort that they're far too late. Miss Pauling stays one step ahead. So, that bear has been dealt with, and the Mercs have found a cozy respite in the home of Heavy's family. Soldier, still naked, begins to hallucinate Christmas Carol style when offered a delicious soup by Heavy's mother. George Washington and Benedict Arnold begin to deliberate within his mind if he should imbibe on the communist soup. Hot Dog enters the race too, and Soldier can't take this. Heavy's mother explains that she offered him soup and now he's been screaming for 5 minutes. You know who else has been screaming? Scout. And he has a vivid flashback of himself as a toddler. And no, it can't be, right? He quickly shunts the idea from his mind, and at the foot of his bed is series newcomer, Jana. Scout's the first man she's seen in 20 years. They will have sex right now. Scout, clearly a virgin, is starting to piss the woman off, and just as he's about to do the deed, he has a vivid hallucination of little Pauling, who more or less convinces him to bother her for another 5 years until she changes her mind. John is impatient, and she decides to take Soldier for a ride instead.
Come here, sweetheart.
And it's actually here where we meet Heavy's full family, Jana and Bronislava, his little sisters. And when Heavy mentions that some of his co-workers are here, they immediately begin to dote. But once they realize that it's these buttheads, they're less than enthused. Scout pleads with Mikhail that he must return to the team. They need his help now more than ever. But Heavy is insistent that he must protect his family. And that's when the girls step in. They were attacked by unknown assailants, but they had absolutely no problem in dispatching them. Hell, there's not even any remains. And Heavy, crestfallen, realizes that
big girls do not need bossy old Misha anymore.
His family agrees to fly back to America with him. And very specifically, Jana seems enthused by this, joining the mercenary crew as both a member, but more importantly, as Soldier's lover. Ooh. All the while, Gray makes preparations, speaking to once again a shadowy figure. Trying to track down the Mercs, Gray hopes for a quick turnaround. And as it turns out, these bums are actually easier to find than they thought. Because before Gray can even retort, the man screams for a roll call, and the mercenaries fall in line. Welcome, Team Fortress Classic, Geriatric Edition. Gray's foaming at the mouth. This couldn't be more perfect. The man promises a pretty swift execution, and he demands for payment. With the crew he's assembled, this will be so easy. Wait. Where's the new guy? In rushes in Herbert Ludwig, the medic, who seems to have been swayed on the sole premise that he could use these guys for experimental pregnancy technology, which they did not sign off on. When asked if hunting his old team would be a problem, he seems enthused to pit his triumphs against his greatest, earliest experiments. We see pretty much our entire cast at once making plans to reconvene in Australia. And when Ms. Pauling remarks that Sniper definitely is here, we see the three in the crosshair. Her comment? Let's just hope he's happy to see us. Time for Blood in the Water. This comic starts in a flashback, shortly before the events of the trial at 2 Fort, where Ms. Pauling meets with a haggard administrator. And put bluntly, there were 89,000 tons of Australium in existence, and despite her horrific methods to secure it all, there's one last cache, and they are no longer alone in their search for it. Helen orders Pauling to take the mercs that she has, grab that Australium, and run. Welcome to Blood in the Water, where Scout and Heavy are deep in the outback. They jab back and forth on the validity of the cache that they're actually heading towards. And Scout tries to lighten the mood by bonding, specifically over their absent fathers, and to Scout, Heavy's is dead and his has disappeared. And Heavy replies,
yes, your father disappears often.
He doesn't love that. Meanwhile, Demo and Miss Pauling touch base with Spy as they move in on Sniper's family home, which has been abandoned for some time now. When they walk into the derelict house, Sniper prowls in the shadows and promptly injects Demo with a substance. Meanwhile, Jana and Soldier are preparing to infiltrate an Australian stronghold. He wishes for her to treat these men with extreme prejudice, which does not mean to be extremely racist. The plan to kill every man in the compound proves an erotic idea to both. And seeing how they'll both probably die in there, Jane offers Jana a token of affection, a necklace of human ears. She seems to like it. Spy interrupts their intimate time before being horribly insulted by the Lady Bear. Shortly after, Jana and Soldier plan on how to get the keys from the place and whom they're going to kill to get them. And it turns out they actually just gave them to Spy, which they're actually all just nice guys. Yeah, it turns out they're actually all really nice guys and they're just kind of hanging out. The couple don't really give a shit and make a romantic gesture out of murder, as is their love language. It turns out they're actually pretty willing to give a submarine, so they've murdered for no good reason. Which is disappointing. I mean, Australians are supposed to be the manliest men in the world, so, what gives? Well, there's no more of their precious element, therefore the whole country has denigrated to a normal status. I mean, damn. Might as well fix these guys up and just get out of here. Maybe a few more ears first? Yeah. So, it turns out Sniper's adoptive parents died shortly after the takeover. This led way to the jaw-dropping discovery that he was in fact not their biological son. And even worse, he's not Australian. In fact, his biological parents hail from the now underwater kingdom of New Zealand, and they hold the last remaining cache of Australium in the world. We cut back to Scout and Heavy, now at Ayers Rock, according to Scout. Heavy believes this formation to be completely made of Australium, but Scout doesn't buy it and punches the thing. It moves a solid foot, and Jeremy's convinced he's suddenly Hercules. But unfortunately for him, it's a balsa wood decoy entrance to an abandoned mine. As they peer over the railing into an abyss, a bullwhip catches Scout and reels him in. Heavy follows Scout's flailing body as they both land, and it turns out it's Hale and Mags. And Mags is inconsolable. She thinks she's just entrapped a child. And once she frees him and finds out that he's actually a grown-ass man, the two just shut him down at every turn. They ignore everything he says. And before they duke it out, Mikhail reminds Saxton that he's literally his employee. To which then he feels comfortable enough to divulge that all the Australium here has actually been stolen. Back to Dimmo and Pauling, who are each tied to a chair. Dimmo wakes up and ensures Miss Pauling that they'll be free soon, and Sniper puts him back under. Then he comes out with the truth. 6 months after Gray's takeover, his parents passed away. But here's the thing, they were not his birth parents, and he has no clue who they are. But that's the whole reason Miss Pauling and Dimmo are even here. They can go and meet them right now. So he frees them. And on their way out of there, Pauling spots the shallow graves they were meant to be buried in. And if there's anyone who can criticize your methods on disposal, it's Pauling. We actually find out what Dell's been up to for quite some time, as he and an aged administrator test out a Mark V of the Australium Life Extender. The world's supply is obviously low, and she's the last captor of it. Once this is out, it's game over. She doesn't mind this. She just needs enough to settle an old debt. And finally, the team assembles in a tiny Australian submarine, deep within the ocean. Pauling doesn't love that Jana gets to tag along. She is not an employee, and she is wearing a smile of ears. But Jana explains that she doesn't like her either. And this grudge match actually doesn't settle for a long time, maybe ever, really. Anyways, Pauling herself explains what actually happened to the mythical country of New Zealand. If Australia was the land of invulnerable brutes, then the Kiwis were the world's greatest minds. Without the god particle of Australium, mind you, so that's quite impressive. So why are they underwater looking for the country? Well, in a move of individualism, let's say, they sunk the country deep underwater in a giant bubble. And once they pull into port, they meet Bill Bell, who is Sniper's biological father. He's quite excited to finally meet Mun D, his prodigal son, who is Sniper's biological father. And he's actually quite excited to finally meet Mun D, his prodigal son. Turns out the whole sinking move was Bill Bell's idea. He claims he pleaded with the Council of New Zealand, and they actually hated the idea and rejected him. He felt this move was necessary as a doomsday crier. The world was ending soon, and the Kiwis should preserve themselves for eternity. But in correction, the council themselves actually listened to the idea. I mean, they were underwater. And in exact fashion to Superman, as I'm sure you were expecting, Bill Bell fashioned a one-seater rocket ready to escape to space should New Zealand fall. He offers himself to go in an act of brave selfishness, and Larna, his wife, begins to fight with him for the seat. In both of their self-centered bickering, a toddler-aged sniper crawled into the ship and activated it, launching himself into freedom, landing him in the outback of Australia, where the Mundys discovered him and raised him as their own. Beat for beat Clark Kent style. Some odd 30 years later, Larna's a fucking wreck and Bill Bell's a delusional genius. The only known Kiwis left in existence, including Sniper. Reality then starts to cascade for Mr. Mundy, the true origin of his existence and the negligence that had him murder millions. They ask what Bill Bell did with the remaining Australium, and it turns out he had no clue he had a functionally magical element. He painted his rocket with it. All of his rockets. Many of which have exploded. Larna hands Pauling a glass of wine. While Sniper and his father argue the validity of Sniper's time with the Mundys, Larna decides she's not going to wait for another opportunity to feel fresh air again. She sneaks in and launches the rocket, punching yet another hole into the dome. But the only problem is that rocket actually worked. Larna's now just marooned in space. But for our land dwellers, the facility is flooding fast, and they need to act quickly. And while everyone scrambles onto the sub, another one pulls in. And just as Sniper is about to greet what he thinks is his father, he feels something wrong. Dreadfully wrong. 2 shots ring out. They hit center mass on Sniper. Medic and the Team Fortress Classic mercs appear on the deck. And it seems that Team Fortress has much to answer to. To be continued. Time for old wounds. Somewhere on the Grey Gravelco Island, the man himself and Team Fortress Classic Heavy discuss the whereabouts of the last cache and the woman who stole it. Already there's hints of dissension. Grey won't discuss any plans with Heavy, but it's already far too late. Grey wants the world, but he doesn't have the muscle. Heavy knows Australian properties, and the clock is ticking for him and his team. So it's looking like Grey's days are finally numbered. Meanwhile, Soldier, bloodied and beaten, taunts his captor, the TFC Pyro, a scarred elderly woman named Beatrice. She demands the location of the administrator. He doesn't know. Seeing this is going nowhere, she decides to end his suffering with a fucking drill. Fuck. Jonna pipes up to make a brave sacrifice, but Beatrice denies the privilege. She's next anyways. Speaking of being tortured to death, Grey Man has joined that list. Heavy sees no use for him, so he just tears the machine from his spine and leaves him absolutely fucked. Jonna uses this distraction to escape her bonds and obliterate Beatrice with her own bandolier. And when Soldier asks how she managed to escape, well, she shows him. Shit. And just as they are set to leave, Grey pleads with whatever little life he's got left to see Miss Pauling. And it turns out, Tavish is actually having a pretty similar situation. Except his only available allies at this moment are his own internal organs. And his liver has had enough, and it jumps ship. So, his heart takes full command, and his lungs bar his liver from any further entry. They've got this, and they will see their flesh vessel thrive to the very end. And while this occurs, Pyro, Miss Pauling, and Spy are bound in their cell. And seeing as they only have one dental gadget left, there's no way out this time. Spy offers the consolation that really only one member died in her care. That's not that bad, but now that they're likely all goners, Miss Pauling loses it. Spy offers a cyanide molar to Pauling in hopes that they can just get this over quickly, but before he can spit it over to her, Heavy barges in. He lets the crew know that the island has been infested with large automatons and escape seems nigh impossible. Heavy does seem to offer himself in a sacrifice for their escape, but instead Miss Pauling offers him coordinates for the rendezvous with the administrator. And as they run out, TFC Demo runs in, and Heavy's disguise fades. It was TFC's Spy all along, and he offers those coordinates to Demo. After which, he He offers to eliminate the rest of the prisoners. And that plan would go great if it weren't for Jonna, and that doesn't work. Now it does. This leads to a hostage situation, as Demo Man grabs Miss Pauling. And normally this would work really well on someone, but not these two psychopaths. Jonna punches Miss Pauling so hard she launches Demo, and who is then strangled to death by Spy. Miss Pauling seems barely alive, and to make things worse, Soldier throws Gray Man in her cell while they still investigate this toilet. Gray then makes another plea to stop the administrator. She's too fast, too wicked, too dangerous. Far more than himself. Which prompts Miss Pauling's most haunting soliloquy. How she's killed, lied, framed, stolen, all in Helen's name. She knows exactly what she could do with that power, and Flo will be by her side when that happens. He's already dead. Fuck. We cut to Medic and a dead sniper, who is in God's secret base in heaven. He pleads to stay with his parents, but in their own words,
"Oh, son, there's rotten fucks out there that need killing."
And with a quick pump, boom, Sniper lives again. His resulting body is grisly, similar to a patchwork Frankenstein's monster. And if you know Medic by this point, there's absolutely something inside of Sniper now. Anyways, he's not happy. To Sniper, Medic killed him. In fact, the fucker was smug to see him go. And Medic just says that his face just looks like that. But Mundy doesn't buy it. He asks how he could join such a horrible gang. And Mr. Ludwig is pretty forthcoming. Times were really rough, and where the hell else can a merc who doesn't have a license even go? Sniper asks how long he was gone for. The result? 12 hours. Sniper realizes he's actually done it. He's seen the afterlife. Medic tries to explain to him that was merely a hallucination before brain death, but Sniper doesn't believe that. He knows what's on the other side, and therefore, he's no longer afraid to die. And that makes him the most dangerous man on this island. TFC Heavy comes in to ruin this party. He's screaming in disbelief, and he even kills Medic's pet bird Archimedes. He starts to rave and rant while Medic brings back his beloved dove. And as he does, Heavy calls him something we don't say anymore. And when Heavy smashes the medigun out of Ludwig's hands, he carefully collects them from the ground, hatred brewing. And when Archimedes coos, he says he couldn't agree more. The Heavy berates the team as they run from the island, stating he had no idea what Gray even wanted given his strange plans. But that's when he reveals something sinister. They weren't looking for solid Australium, no. These robots were designed to siphon the element straight out of the body of Australians. And despite their programming, he's gonna let them try their best on the mercs, blood and bone. And in his words, they, quote,
"Killed some good soldiers today. Friends of mine. I hope this hurts."
To be continued. Face down, deep within the shimmering sand, lies Miss Pauling. She awakens and checks her surroundings. All that awaits her is a lone office door. When she peers in, she's haunted by her muse, the administrator, who explains that, well, this is her afterlife. All the cameras point inward, and she's not amused by the cosmic irony. Pauling battles with this, wondering if it's reality. Helen couldn't care less. Miss Pauling has died and therefore failed her task. And when she explains there's no more Australium, it's why she's been sent here in the first place. Australium, and why she's even been sent here in the first place. Her response is damning. Blood. It's not enough. I need more. She awakens. Medic cries out for more blood. He's placed the blood drain from these bots into everybody's bodies. He's even used his own underwear to sponge it up. And the explanation of how he survived includes Demo, whose blood alcohol level was so high it poisoned their attackers. We even see his organs' perspective on things, keeping a well-oiled machine. Even his liver comes back. Aww. We cut back to the Team Fortress Classic crew, furious and confused. With Gray out of the picture, there's no payment, right? Well, Heavy insists that the Life Extender machine is a creation beyond wealth, and if they do not see its worth, they will soon. Engineer doesn't see it this way, but he obeys the command to let the bots loose. And finally, Scout and Heavy parachute from the heavens to save the mercs. Scout gives Paulie a huge hug, and that's probably not good. Heavy unites with Jana, and seeing one hand is gone and the other is promised a soldier in marriage, well, he fucking hates that. Especially hearing that they're already planning kids. Eventually, Scout lets loose that there's no more Australium. And they were actually accompanied by the two Brock Sampsons of this franchise. But before they can find each other, robots attack. Turns out, Mags and Saxton are just too busy in love. The mercs jumped out an hour ago and they still have yet to notice. And when Jerry finally makes them aware of their fuel situation, they drop themselves with a massive salvo of ammo and the most badass show of power. Heavy sees his baby once again and how he's missed her voice. Then, the mercs go fucking crazy. TFC Sniper seems ready to eliminate Heavy, but then Engineer steps in and stops him. Sniper turns around and blows Ingy's knee off, and the disguise fades. It was Spy all along. Spy cries out apricot for an assumed plan with Sniper, who is having a rather difficult time. Turns out, Sniper had his peepers replaced with cybernetic upgrades, and Spy tries to stall while waiting for one last smoke, while Sniper smears his bloody ass on the window. Sniper grabs a rifle, and before the classic one can make his case, he's a goner. The Spy and Sniper trade a few blows about having a mutual hatred, and share a smoke. Meanwhile, Demo and Medic are tucked away under rubble, and Demo questions why Medic can't just grow him another eye. He absolutely can. Demo is so frustrated with this discovery, but Medic knows that his run-in with Merasmus has left his eye socket cursed. Any replacement is going to attack the team in some Halloween-themed form. They've already fought 8 iterations so far, which is actually accurate. There have been 8 Scream Fortresses since this comic. Demo says he doesn't recall any of these battles, and that's because Medic removed that part of his brain, and then he just forgets the conversation they just had. TFC Heavy promptly finds Ludwig and demands he fix that machine and graft it onto him. He replies that he's a doctor. No patient will die on his table. Instead, they'll die right here. He gets Heavy pretty good a couple of times, but he shirks it off like the barbarian he is. And just as he gets Medic down and is about to let him have it, Sasha starts to purr. It's time for the power couple of the century to duke down with the old man. Oh fuck. Oh fuck. Never mind. Mikhail doesn't love that. Obviously, Mikhail goes fucking apeshit on this old timer. Meanwhile, TFC's Scout and Soldier are getting their things ready. And once this is over, they're gonna settle down together and start an orphanage. And in Scout's last statement here, it's actually pretty implied that they're both offenders, let's call them that. So I'm not sad to see them go. And once they find out they've been covered in gasoline, Pyro proves the hero once a fucking again. Sniper and Pyro join Scout and Miss Pauling, but more notably, Jana and Soldier are once again naked, covered in honey. They're also accompanied by the Australian Murder Squad, which prompts Scout to run and hide. Heavy is still beating the dog shit out of TFC Heavy, and he doesn't give a shit about the big picture here. He killed Medic, and he's gonna die for that. Or maybe he won't. TFC pushed the machine inside of himself. That seemed to be enough to make that work. Uh-oh. And meanwhile, Sniper and Spy are out on their own making a grave discovery. Scout is on death's door. And Spy, in perhaps the most heroic act of this entire series, disguises himself as Tom Jones. Someone Scout believes to be his father. He talks about how he dropped a sex bomb on his mother, and how he couldn't be prouder of his baby boy. And Scout passes in his father's arms. deep within heaven, Scout meets the man in white. God's pissed that not every woman on Earth had sex with Scout. I mean, he's God's gift to women. What are they doing? He's able to convince God to not destroy Earth on his behalf, and instead asks him to send him back until it's really his time. And in return, God says he'll see him again, December 4th, 1987. Spy and Sniper, back in reality, are discussing what to do with his body. It doesn't really matter because, well, Scout's back. Sniper's pretty impressed. Spy isn't. And our loving couple is still covered in nothing but honey. They pull Pauling out of the wreckage while she answers the phone. Dell's on the other end. Turns out he's with an aged administrator who is actually, well, she's dead. Jonna asks who's on the phone, and Miss Pauling lets her in on the secret that she's fucked up. She's fucked up pretty bad. But in Jonna's words, you'll fix it, and we will help. They actually seem to reconcile before Jonna threatens her for being near her man. What a flattering angle that is. She's about to lose her mind, but then sees that nudity covers half of the squad right now. So, yeah. Meanwhile, the heavies battle. Ludwig has a conversation with someone very important. The devil himself. And he cons this man out of his fucking pants. I mean, he owns majority stake in his soul, but even if he only owns one soul, he has 8 more surgically implanted. And if you're keeping count, that's every single one of the mercs. Might explain why they respawn so often. But with those 9 souls, the devil only has 1/9 ownership. So, I mean, he could put to vote if he belongs in hell, but the devil does not enjoy that idea at all. The two settle on a deal. 50 years from now, he'll go, and he'll even sell his soul for the devil's pin. And once he returns, he saves the day with that very same pin, which has become an inductor for labor of the baboon uterus inside of Heavy. I'm just kidding. A good distraction, though. And Heavy whittles away into shit. And the boys are back. And then Medic finds the actual inductor. Damn. Anyways, the last of the robots are finished, and Miss Pauling confronts Heavy. The last of the Australium in the world is gone. TFC Heavy doesn't give a shit. His dying request is only to know how such a squad of fools defeated him. And Miss Pauling title drops in the coolest way possible. They're Team Fortress, and you're dead. That makes her first speech to make it before the subject dies. Nice. And somewhere else, a machine whirs, and Helen lives again. She's got 4 hours left. And Dell's just got a tiny bit left on his reserve. In a fit of rage, she admits that this life she thought was behind her, but she craves revenge. And if she's finally going to end this business once and for all, she may as well look her best. In her literal and last, finest hour, she's willing to end this once and for all. To be concluded. Whew. And if you were a TF2 fan at the time that this dropped, you, just like me, waited 7 years for the next issue. But it would fucking deliver. Now, it's 1979, 7 actual years since the last comic. Huh. An inmate, Diego, is profusely apologizing to the kingpin of Badlands Correctional Institute, who is revealed to be Merasmus. He looks to be doing pretty well. As he's obliterating Diego, Soldier, Jonna, and their children break into the cell. General Patton Doe and Georgia Washington Doe. Georgia promptly snaps T-Bone's neck. Merasmus is actually pretty cozy here, and he's ripped now, and he owns the joint. But Jane and Jonna need a babysitter, which, I mean, he doesn't love that idea. It'd be a good deal if the Korean Mafia weren't on his ass, which Soldier lets him know that's true, so fine, they're all gonna get the fuck out of Dodge, I guess. Soldier fills Merasmus in on the moments between the last comic and now. And during Miss Pauling's title drop, the couple were annoying the fuck out of their brother-in-law. He tries asking Heavy for Jonna's hand in marriage, and when he refuses, he just asks her instead, and boom, love. Soldier reveals that the cave he's lived in for years now is actually lined with gold. It's not gold, and it's in fact Australium, and there's fucking tons of it. That means he's been living in the last reserve of Australium maybe ever in the world. Miss Pauling snatches that and obfuscates it from Saxton when she calls for an urgent retreat. Maggie actually ditches Hale, and he flies the only plane out of there that works, leaving the Mercs with a beater piece of shit with a high mortality rate. They actually get it off the ground and are able to parachute to Dell's hideout. The hideout in question is actually an advanced secret military base, implying that Team Fortress is actually the run of the litter when it comes to international mercenary squads. I mean, even their plaque is removed. When Ms. Pauling slams the Australium onto the reception desk, nobody seems that impressed. Before she's actually shown out, Dell saves the day. The crew reunites, and Ms. Pauling is extremely frantic and needs to see the administrator ASAP. To which Dell acquiesces and leads them down to a lone door leading down a labyrinthine cavern. He sticks back. If Radigan never felt he should go down there, why should he? Scout's actually pretty nervous that they're gonna die, so he confides in Miss Pauling the conclusion of his true feelings. He's actually decided he's gonna move on from doting over her. There's plenty of fish in the sea, and besides, he's God's gift to women, and now he knows it. And yeah, she agrees on the fish part. And there has to be more women attractive than her out there. And just like his imaginary Pauling, they bump fists. Just as they're about to open the door, we travel back to the 1820s. A young Elizabeth is at the doorstep of one Zepheniah Mann of Mann & Sons Munitions Concerns. She receives a rather cold welcome, and is told that her job as governess will consist of shaping the brothers into bloodthirsty megalomaniacs until one last survivor inherits Manco. An odd 27 years pass. Elizabeth and Zepheniah find themselves in Twofold, signing his will and testament. As he finishes pinning it, Elizabeth reveals she's lied the entire time. She lied about the land. The sons will fight for not as long as God will allow, but none will emerge victorious. She whispers a venomous secret in his ear before he passes. And he's buried in the mausoleum out back. Elizabeth nearly fell short of her promise, finding herself on a stool with a noose. She saw no point in the future and decided to take her own life. The man to save her proved unsuspected, Gray Man. He's aware that Elizabeth is just another name for the amorphous evil that hangs before him. He uses his machine to revive her, and Gray presses about improving such a device. Elizabeth sees no usage for Australium, but Gray doesn't see it that way. She tells him he's a fool. There's no use, and she certainly wouldn't keep it around. That's what I would say too. You know, if I were lying. Finding out it's not worthless, she digs up old Zepheniah. In the present, Miss Pauling finally reunites with her shadowy mentor, who speaks to a tortured, immortal Zepheniah. Turns out, he's had to watch every single attempt at the land his sons have warred over, meaning every single match of Team Fortress 2 that's ever been played. Zepheniah has had no choice but to witness. Miss Pauling obfuscates the Australium when she's asked for it. And soon, the administrator begins to crumble before the crew. She spits one last insult his way, claiming her victory, and that every single moment was worth it. It was all worth it. They both crumble into dust, bringing the feud to its grave end. When Miss Pauling finally leaves, she's insistent that Dell dig up all the Australium in Soldier's cave and chuck it into an underwater trench. The deepest one he can find, if he even knows of one. And meanwhile, we catch up with someone we haven't seen in a bit. A heartbroken and drunken Saxton Hale, reminiscing on his past with Mags. Mr. Bidwell interrupts the pity party with a document signing. Turns out they got Manco back from Olivia, who is now their secretary. And honestly, they're both miserable. Olivia hated Gray, and all the trophies in this room are from a billion years ago. Saxton, seeing their predicament, fires her from Manco. In pure disbelief and jubilation, she asks, "Really?" The two share a hug.
Go live your life. Make your own trophies,
he tells her. And she walks out of the building, ready to start her own life. Now, Bidwell reminds him that she's actually still in his custody. But Saxton wants to set up Olivia for life, and the best way he could do that actually is to fire himself. He was going to offer it to Bidwell, but he politely refuses. He then offers it to Reddy. He tells them to just work it out if they wish to co-own. Olivia was right. He's got new trophies to earn, and he knows just who can help him. Meanwhile, in Gwangju, South Korea, Soldier and Merasmus are tied to chairs before being tortured by the aforementioned mafia. Turns out the story was being recapped by Soldier, and Merasmus was tortured to death. And as he haunts the room, Soldier is next to be butchered. But before he can be killed, Heavy and Sniper confront the assailants. It turns out they only owed about $17 worth, so they just fork over the money. Merasmus haunts a brick in Soldier's pants, and they're kind of free to go. And if all goes well, he'll grab another brick, and, Tom Jones can come too. And what about the rest of the mercenaries? Well, Scout, now the single father of many, many children, has invited the crew over to Boston for the holidays. Spy, being the first to see him, is a little curious on how he can support so many kids with, no job? Turns out, he sued the city of Twofold for his injuries, and he won. Looks like they studied up on their law. And while invited inside, Tanya, Scout's daughter, asks how Spy knows Scout. He introduces himself as a friend from work, and if she wants, well, she can have his balaclava. Soon, everyone else begins to arrive, and I do mean everyone. And the last person to arrive? You, the reader. The person reading the comic or you watching this video. Scout, keeping himself from getting too emotional, says what we've all been so glad to hear. We couldn't have done any of this without you. And very, very lastly, it's present day. And in the African veldt is Saxton and Maggie. Fist fighting all those cheetahs seemed to have attracted more cheetahs. And it looks like they've only got two options: fight or jump off the cliff. And Saxton, capping off Team Fortress, drops a prophetic quote he said many, many times before.
What's the matter, Max? You want to live forever?
I'd like to take this moment to thank everyone who's made this possible. The squad behind the Team Fortress comics were Heather McConaughey Campbell, Marin Renray Marmula, Jay Pinkerton, and Eric Wolfpaw. There are also countless people who I don't want to go unnamed. I'm going to flash them all on the screen right now. Thank you for your endless hard work. I would also, lastly, like to give a wonderful and warm thank you to the late Rick May, the voice of Soldier. And I'd like to extend a massive thank you to the thousands who have upheld the Team Fortress 2 wiki, where which of the timeline of the entire series was carefully groomed and has been invaluable for the research of this video. All of you are heroes. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you to my patrons. If any of you were working on something while watching this video, of course I hope the project goes well. I will see you again next time. Is someone there? Can I help you? Hey,
Good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of the Bureau of...
The Bureau?
Yes, the Bureau. The Federal Bureau of Video Game Lore, FBVG.
They have that? Is there a problem here?
I'll cut it to you straight. You've introduced roughly 125 facts over 30 separate chapters. This qualifies the video as an extensive overview, not exhaustive.
Oh, alright. How much would I have to do to get there?
Let's say 20 more would do you.
Okay. All right, how much time do I have left?
For 20 facts, 1 minute.
Oh my god. Okay. Shit. Well, okay, here goes. Dimmerman blew up his adopted parents trying to kill the Loch Ness Monster. The endgame soda bonk is basically battery acid. Heavy's guns all have names: Sasha, Oksana, Svetlana, and Sheila. Old Nick is the Australian spirit of Christmas. He was assassinated by a boy named Little Jack. Scout had a stuffed animal of Poopy Joe when he was a toddler. Beloved YouTuber and streamer German985 is the reason for Scout's name being Jeremy. TFC engineer is actually Fred Conagher, Dell's father. Scout getting handed a box of submachine guns is a reference to his unused primary in the beta. Soldier claims he's legally recognized as a priest from Guam and can perform exorcisms. Medic canonically worked for the Axis powers in World War II. Christopher the Communist Mountain is actually a reference to a real communist peak in 1962. It's actually plausible that Amelia Earhart landed in the Jute Mountains, but that's not likely. Scout argues that he's known as Pawn for 6 years, 5 months, and 23 days. That's the exact time between Team Fortress 2 and a comic A Cold Day in Hell. The woman who Gremlin spies on lockable weapon, the ambassador bears a striking resemblance to Scout's mother. Every major comic book cover is a reference to an iconic comic book in history. There's an ancient Sumerian god of circuses named Bonzo. He can be seen in the Carnival of Carnage, has a hat and unusual effect in his likeness. Saxon Hell has his own action figure, aptly named Action Saxon. In Team Fortress 2, heaven is debated to exist, but hell is certainly a tangible place. France is the talking France with the judge of the SFM movies, the Saxies, before opening the votes to the public. And there are tons and tons of company logos in Team Fortress 2 that are references to the original art team. Whew, okay. How's that for 20 facts?
You went over by 1 second.
What? No. So that means I went
Overtime.
As the rest of the team watches Scout's attempts to win over Miss Pauling, Edic and Mingineer. It turns out that these were not tumors, but Insac Mingineer.
Damn you all to hell!
I can't do it. The Ballad of Poopy Joe. Ballad of Poopy Joe. Miss Pauling. The two.
Well, that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. Tune in next time when we talk about Blaster Master.